Imagine you're trying to untangle this massive, almost invisible web. Because when we look back at the history of revolutionary movements, it's just incredibly tempting to get swept up in the, the cinematic drama of it all.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a movie.
Right. You've got these secret midnight meetings, daring raids, and
Yeah.
just absolute defiance against a global empire. But if you're trying to actually understand how these movements function, especially if you're organizing this history for a deep understanding or an exam like the UPSC, the dramatic stories are just the surface.
Yeah, they're the hook, but not the substance.
Exactly. The golden rule here, and the real test, is whether you can map the architecture. Who built the organization? Who led the action? And how did those actions directly link to the big events? We are mapping networks today.
That's the crucial distinction. We're not here today to just recount heroic folklore. We're taking a massive amount of historical data from our sources and building a structural map in your mind.
Right.
We're looking at the precise nodes, the founders, the geographies, and the outcomes.
And for you listening, here is our mission for this deep dive. We're extracting high-yield structured data from the sources. We're focusing on the revolutionary movements both inside India and abroad. But to do that, we are intentionally filtering out the noise.
Right, setting the ground rules is super important here.
Yeah, so that means no moderate phase politics today. We are bypassing the Gandhian mass movements entirely. Not because they don't matter, obviously, but because we are focusing purely on the underground, armed, and radical networks.
Exactly. This is a network-based revision audio. We're designing this for pure accuracy. So you're going to hear me use cues like important or UPSC trap or remember this because, there are very specific places where people get tripped up.
I love that. So to make this map work, we've divided the timeline into 4 distinct chronological phases. We'll start with the early 1900s, move into the massive disruptions of World War I, then explore the interwar period of the 20s and 30s, and finally touch on the World War II network.
And for those of you trying to really bulletproof your memory, definitely stay with us until the very end.
Yes, the final sprint.
Right. We're going to do a rapid-fire 1-minute synthesis of the absolute most common historical traps people fall into.
Awesome. Let's pull up that first era. Phase 1, the early 1900s, we're looking roughly at 1905 to 1915. And to understand why these underground networks suddenly spiked, we really have to look at the fallout of the Swadeshi movement.
Yeah, the causal link there is essential.
Right, because millions of people had mobilized for these public, peaceful protests against the partition of Bengal, and the British basically just crushed it. The petitions completely failed.
The frustration from that, it was immense. You had an entire generation of politically awakened youth who realized that asking the British Empire nicely was just a dead end. They had to pivot.
That's like, I always think of these early revolutionary groups like aggressive underground startups.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because the public market, the protests, had been shut down, so they took their operations behind closed doors. And the first major cluster of these startups sprouted in Bengal.
Let's map the architecture of this Bengal cluster using our strict template. The anchor organization here is the Anushilan Samiti, which was founded in 1902.
Okay, 1902.
And the key founders driving this were Pramotha Mehtar and Aurobindo Ghosh. Now, initially, their objective was somewhat mild. They wanted to promote physical and moral training among the youth.
Like fitness clubs, basically.
Exactly, fitness and reading groups. But very quickly, that evolved into a philosophy of armed revolutionary violence.
And like any ambitious startup, they began to spin off branches.
Right.
Which brings us to the Jugantar Group in 1906.
Yes, Jugantar is crucial. It began as a revolutionary weekly newspaper, but quickly morphed into an inner circle, a direct branch of the Anushilan Samiti.
And who were the leaders there?
The founders here were Barindra Kumar Ghosh, who remember is Aurobindo's brother, and Bhupendranath Dutta.
So they have the organization, and they have the ideology. But what's the defining action? Because this all inevitably leads to the Alipore bomb case in 1908, right?
Yes, also known as the Marari-Pukur conspiracy.
Right. And the target there was a British judge named Kingsford, who was just notorious for handing down incredibly sadistic, cruel punishments to young Indian nationalists.
He was hated. So 2 young revolutionaries, Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chaki, were tasked with assassinating him. They threw a bomb at a carriage they firmly believed was his.
But the outcome was a complete tragedy, wasn't it? Kingsford wasn't even in that carriage. 2 innocent British women were killed instead.
Yeah, and the fallout was immediate and devastating. Prafulla Chaki shot himself before he could be captured, and Khudiram Bose was arrested and hanged.
Wow. And this is where the historical memory gets incredibly blurred, right?
Huge UPSC trap here. Listen closely. The British police traced the bomb-making network back to the Jugantar group. They arrested both Aurobindo Ghosh and his brother Barindra.
Which is where their paths violently diverge.
Exactly. Aurobindo was defended in court by the brilliant lawyer C.R. Duss, and against all odds, he was completely acquitted.
He didn't go to prison at all.
No. He stepped away from revolutionary politics entirely and moved to Pondicherry to become a spiritual philosopher.
Meanwhile, his brother, Barindra Ghosh, was convicted and got a life sentence.
This is the personality trap. People constantly mix up which brother became the spiritual leader and which one got the life sentence. Just remember, Aurobindo equals acquitted and spiritual. Barindra equals life in prison.
Got it. Now, before we move out of Bengal, we have to address the logistics of running an armed resistance. Because weapons and safe houses, they cost money. How did they fund this?
They funded it through coordinated robberies, which they viewed as political actions. The most notable event to map here is the Boer dacoity of 1908.
Right, the Boer dacoity.
This was organized specifically by the Dhaka branch of the Anushalan Samiti under the leadership of Pulin Bahari Das. The sole objective was just to loot funds to finance their revolutionary activities.
It's fascinating that while this intense localized pressure cooker is boiling in Bengal, there is a completely separate network operating right under the nose of the empire. Let's pivot abroad for a second.
Let's do it.
Why on earth were revolutionaries setting up shop in London and Paris? I mean, isn't that walking directly into the lion's den?
It totally seems counterintuitive, but being in Europe actually gave them unparalleled access. They had access to Indian students studying abroad who were often from, wealthy, influential families.
Oh, that makes sense.
And they had access to a relatively freer press to actually print their radical literature.
So let's map the London center. The hub was a place called India House, right? Founded by Shyamalji Krishnavarma.
Yes. The objective of India House was purely radicalization and mobilization. Shyamalji Krishnavarma used his journal, The Indian Sociologist, to broadcast these anti-imperial ideas to Indian expatriates.
And this intellectual radicalization eventually resulted in physical violence. Because in 1909, a member of this London circle, Madan Lal Dhingra, just walked up to a high-ranking official at the India office named Curzon Willie and assassinated him.
He did. And the British response was immediate and ruthless. Dhingra was hanged, and the authorities cracked down so hard on India House that the entire network was fractured.
Shyamalji Krishnavarma actually had to flee London, didn't he?
Yeah, he relocated to Paris.
Which naturally bridges us to the Paris network, which I know is anchored by a really iconic moment.
It is. The central figure to remember in Paris is Madame Bikaji Kama. She operated a journal called Bande Mataram out of Paris and Geneva.
Right.
But the PYQ hook, the node you must connect her to, is an event in 1907. She attended the International Socialist Conference in Stuttgart, Germany, and became the first person to unfurl an early version of the Indian national flag on foreign soil.
It's such a powerful visual, and it perfectly wraps up our first chronological phase. So these early groups laid the groundwork, but then the entire geopolitical chessboard flipped. That brings us to phase 2, the World War I Revolutionary Network.
Exactly. So World War I breaks out in 1914, and the British Empire is suddenly fighting for its life in Europe. They had to drain a massive number of troops out of India just to feed the war machine.
It's the classic scenario, right? While the cat is away, the mice get ambitious. The revolutionaries saw this massive British distraction as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
A global opportunity.
But what always strikes me is that the epicenter for this wasn't in India, it was in North America.
Yes, this is the Ghadar movement, and listen, this is arguably one of the most critical networks to understand for the exam.
Let's map it.
The Ghadar Party was founded in 1913. The word Ghadar literally translates to revolt or mutiny. The key founders and leaders were Lala Hardayal, Sohan Singh Bhakna, who served as the president, and a very young Kartar Singh Sarabha.
But let's clarify the geography here, because this is where people constantly get tripped up on the PYQs. Why North America?
Well, you had a very large population of Punjabi immigrants, many of them former soldiers working in lumber mills and farms along the west coast of the U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
And they were facing intense racial discrimination there. They realized that as long as India was a colonized nation, they were never going to be treated as equals anywhere in the world.
So they established their headquarters, the Jugantar Ashram in San Francisco.
Yes, very important. San Francisco, USA, not Berlin, not Singapore. If you see a multiple choice question, Gadar firmly equals San Francisco, North America.
Got it. And what was their main objective?
It was audacious. They weren't just protesting, they wanted to ignite a synchronized pan-India mutiny within the British Indian Army.
Wow, using the empire's own soldiers against it.
Exactly. And the associated event, the spark that lit the fuse, was the Komagata Maru incident in 1914.
Right, where a ship filled mostly with Sikh immigrants sailed to Canada, was denied entry due to those racist exclusion laws, and was forced all the way back to Calcutta.
Where British police just fired on the passengers. That horrific injustice was the absolute catalyst. It triggered the 1915 Gadar revolt attempt. Thousands of revolutionaries literally packed up their lives in America and traveled back to India to spurk this mutiny in the army cantonments.
But the outcome was failure, right? The empire's intelligence network was just too strong.
Unfortunately, yes. The plan was leaked by informants due to treachery. The British responded with overwhelming force, passing the draconian Defense of India Act in 1915, specifically to crush this network through summary trials and executions.
Now, while the Gadarites were moving from America, there was a completely different arm of this World War I strategy operating out of Europe, the Berlin Committee and the Indo-German conspiracy.
Yes, the Zimmermann Plan.
How did they coordinate an underground supply chain during a global war?
Well, Indian revolutionaries in Europe managed to coordinate directly with the German Foreign Office. The Germans agreed to send shipments of arms and ammunition to revolutionaries back in India, specifically aiming for the Jugantar network.
So you have this massive foreign coordination. Germany supplies the guns, Indian networks receive them. We see Bhagat Jana, also known as Jatindranath Mukherjee, physically waiting on the coast of Balasore for these German arms to arrive.
But just like the Gadar mutiny, the intelligence was intercepted. The arms ships never arrived. Bhagat Jatan was tracked down and died a hero's death in a police encounter in Balasore.
And another major coordinator of this mutiny, Rash Bahari Bose, realized the entire network was collapsing and actually managed to escape the country, right?
Yes, he escaped and made his way to Japan.
We will definitely be coming back to Rash Bahari Bose later. But that massive failure really marks the end of the WWI phase.
It does.
Moving into phase 3, the interwar period of the 1920s and 30s. We have to understand the psychology of this era to understand the organizations.
Absolutely, because after World War I, Gandhi emerges. He launches the non-cooperation movement. For the first time, you have millions of young Indians engaged in an open, non-violent mass struggle. The hope and energy are electric.
But then, after the violence at Chauri Chaura, Gandhi abruptly pulls the plug on the entire movement.
Yeah, a sudden withdrawal.
And you have a whole generation of energized youth left completely stranded. They went from marching in the streets for Gandhi to basically reading Karl Marx in secret.
That disillusionment caused a profound ideological shift. The Russian Revolution had just happened, and they began viewing their struggle not just as overthrowing the British, but overthrowing the entire capitalist imperialist system.
This shift is the absolute highest priority organizational evolution you need to map for this deep dive, the transition from the HRA to the HSRA.
Listeners, this is the highest frequency PYQ trap zone. Pay attention.
Let's break it down. Step 1, the HRA.
The Hindustan Republican Association. It was founded in Kanpur in 1924. The key founders to map here are Ramprasad Bismil and Sachin Sanyal.
Sachin Sanyal is crucial because he authored a book called Bandi Jawan, right?
Yes, which translates to A Life of Captivity. It basically became the ideological textbook for this new generation.
Now, just like the early startups in Bengal, the HRA needed funding, which brings us to their defining event, the Kakori train robbery in August 1925.
They halted a train in Kakori and looted the government treasury boxes. But the outcome, the British backlash, was catastrophic for the group. They hunted down the leadership. Ram Prasad Bismil and Ashfaq Ullah Khan, among others, were convicted and hanged.
The HRA was effectively dismantled.
Completely.
Which necessitates step 2. The survivors realize they need to reorganize and they need to rebrand their ideology. So in 1928, at the Ferozshah Kotla ruins in Delhi, they established the HSRA.
The Hindustan Socialist Republican Association.
That addition of the word socialist is everything, isn't it?
It is. It marks their official shift toward Marxism and mass politics. The key leaders driving this new vision are Bhagat Singh and Chandrasekhar Azad.
I want to pause here because this always confuses people. If the HSRA shifted to a Marxist ideology and their goal was to organize workers and peasants for a mass revolution, why are their two most famous events assassinations and bombings?
That seems like a regression to the old individual terrorism tactic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a brilliant question, and it goes to the core of their strategy. They weren't committing these acts expecting to overthrow the government with a single bullet or a single bomb. They were using spectacular violence as a megaphone.
A megaphone.
Hmm.
Okay, let's map those two events to see how that worked. First, the Saunders assassination in 1928, also known as the Lahore Conspiracy.
So Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, and Azad assassinated a young British police officer named John Saunders. But the context is crucial. They did this specifically to avenge the death of the deeply respected veteran leader Lala Lajpat Rai.
Right, because Lala Lajpat Rai had recently died from injuries sustained during a brutal police baton charge while he was peacefully protesting the Simon Commission.
Exactly. So the assassination was a highly visible statement of retribution. But the second event, the Central Assembly bomb case in 1929, is where the megaphone strategy really crystallizes.
Bhagat Singh and Batukeshwar Dutt threw bombs from the visitors' gallery into the Central Legislative Assembly in Delhi.
But here is the key. The bombs were intentionally designed to be relatively harmless.
Wait, really?
Yes, they weren't trying to cause a massacre. Their own leaflets said it clearly, to make the deaf hear. They were protesting the passage of two draconian laws, the Public Safety Bill and the Trade Disputes Bill, which were designed to crush labor rights.
And importantly, they didn't run away.
No, they stood there, threw their leaflets, and intentionally courted arrest. They wanted to be put on trial.
Because the trial gave them a stage. Every newspaper in the country printed their daily court statements. They turned the British legal system into a nationwide broadcasting network for their socialist ideology.
It was brilliant propaganda. But the ultimate outcome, sadly, was martyrdom. Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru were hanged in 1931 for their role in the Lahore Conspiracy.
And Chandrasekhar Azad.
He managed to evade capture for a while, but ultimately shot himself during a fierce police gunfight at a park in Allahabad, just refusing to be taken alive.
I want to make sure we cement the historical boundaries here. Do not mix up the personalities in the Kakori conspiracy with the Lahore conspiracy.
Huge trap.
Right, so if you see HRA and Kakori, your brain should immediately link to Ramprasad Bismil and Ashfaqullah Khan.
And if you see HSRA in Lahore, you link to Bhagat Singh and Chandrasekhar Azad. Keep those networks completely separate.
Perfect. Now, to round out the 1930s, we just have to swing our map back to Bengal one last time. The Chittagong cluster.
Yes, the Indian Republican Army Chittagong branch. The architect here is Surya Sen, who was universally and affectionately known as Masterda because he was a school teacher.
And their associated event was the Chittagong Armory Raid in 1930.
Right, an incredibly sophisticated, coordinated, military-style raid on two British police armories.
What stands out so starkly about Surya Sen's network compared to the others we've discussed is who was standing on the front lines.
This is a major PYQ hook. It was the unprecedented level of active, militant participation by women. We're not just talking about women hiding weapons. We're talking about women leading combat units.
Like Prithalata Wadadar and Kalpana Dutt.
Exactly. Note those names. Prithalata Wadadar died leading a raid on a European club, and Kalpana Dutt fought alongside Surya Sen, was captured, and received a life sentence. Surya Sen himself was eventually caught and hanged.
Incredible. And that brings us to our final chronological era. Phase 4, revolutionary activities abroad and the World War II linkages.
Because history has a way of rhyming. Just like WWI, another global war breaks out, and the revolutionaries once again look beyond India's borders for leverage.
So we're going to keep this highly focused on the structural facts to clear up one of the most persistent historical traps regarding the Indian National Army, the INA.
Let's do it.
The geography here is Japan and Singapore. And the misconception revolves around who actually built the organization.
Connect the nodes back to World War I. Remember Rash Behari Bose?
The man who escaped to Japan after the failed mutiny.
Exactly. Decades later, during WWII, he resurfaces. Rash Behari Bose is the one who initially founded and organized the Indian Independence League and the INA in 1942.
But the name everyone knows is Subhas Chandra Bose.
Because Subhas Chandra Bose arrived later, he took over the leadership of the INA from Rash Behari Bose in 1943 in Singapore. That's where he proclaimed the Provisional Government of Free India.
So if a question asks who originally founded the INA, the strict factual answer is Rash Behari Bose. Subhas Chandra Bose inherited it and expanded it.
Precisely. Do not fall for that trap.
All right, we have mapped the entire network across 4 decades. We've traced the startups in Bengal, the global reach of Ghadar, the ideological evolution of the HSRA, and the final army of the INA.
We covered a lot of ground.
It's time for the 1-minute rapid revision. Give us the 5 absolute biggest historical traps people fall into. Let's sprint.
Let's lock it in. Trap 1. The Bengal origin story. Anushlan Samiti was founded by Pramotha Mitter and Aurobindo Ghosh. Jugantar was the splinter group led by Barindra Kumar Ghosh. Do not swap their founders.
Got it. Trap 2.
Trap 2. The Gadar geography. The Gadar Party's headquarters was in San Francisco, North America. It was not in Berlin, and it was not in Singapore.
Perfect. Number 3.
Trap 3. The interwar leader mismatch. The Kakori conspiracy belongs to the HRA, Ramprasad Bismil, and Ashfaq Khan. The Lahore conspiracy and the assembly bombing belong to the HSRA, Bhagat Singh, and Chandrasekhar Azad.
Keep those separate. Trap 4.
Trap 4. Event linkage confusion. The British officer Saunders was assassinated to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai. Do not mistakenly link the Saunders assassination to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. That was Udham Singh assassinating O'Dwyer years later in London.
Very important distinction. And the final trap.
Trap 5. The INA creation myth. Rash Behari Bose founded the INA. Subhas Chandra Bose took it over.
Boom. That is the high-yield map right there.
Oh.
You can visualize the nodes, the people, and the cause and effect that drove them. But before we close this deep dive out, I want to leave you with a slightly different way to look at this entire era.
Oh, what's the thought?
We spent so much time analyzing how independence was ultimately won through, constitutional negotiations and massive, nonviolent civil disobedience. And that is obviously true. But look at the sheer relentless pressure generated by the networks we just mapped today.
Right, it was constant.
For 40 years, the British administration had to deal with targeted assassinations, looted treasuries, global arms conspiracies, and bombs in their legislative halls.
It forced them to constantly look over their shoulders. They could never relax.
Exactly. So the question to ponder is this. Did the terrifying constant pressure of this armed underground actually force the British Empire to the negotiating table with the nonviolent leaders?
Oh, wow.
Were these revolutionary startups the invisible hammer that finally made the peaceful ample work?
That's a fascinating perspective. It means you can't truly understand the success of the peace without understanding the mechanics of the rebellion.
Keep building those connections in your mind. The history is so much richer when you can see the whole web. We will catch you on the next deep dive.